Tonight, the price you'll pay as tariffs trickle down to the consumer.
It is hard to get off your mind, especially when you're holding a golf club and, like you said, golf balls that will cost more.
Paying the price for a trade war and weaker loonie.
We've baked in about a 20% potential loss in equipment sales. We're angry, we're frustrated, we're confused.
What will it cost Canadians?
We were surprised, really surprised, because we bought some of our stuffs there.
Laying the groundwork for liquidation at Hudson's Bay.
It's just not looking good, unfortunately, for them right now.
How the historic retailer could soon become history itself. Sick of signing notes, the growing call to end the time-consuming task.
It takes up patient time, physician time. All that costs the system money.
Plus, Saturn reigns supreme.
The sheer number of 128 is unprecedented.
The discovery of new moons leaving other planets in the dust.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. As the North American trade war marches on, we're getting a better picture of just how much it could cost you, the consumer. This week, Ottawa hit back on steel and aluminum tariffs by retaliating with levies on billions of dollars in U.S. goods. The reality now setting in for businesses and shoppers. CTV's Jeremy Sharon starts us off.
They're already teeing off in the capital, but there's a new capital T on golfers' minds to start this season: tariffs.
It is hard to get off your mind, especially when you're holding a golf club and, like you said, golf balls that will cost more.
That's due to retaliatory tariffs Canada imposed this week on steel and aluminum products and a list of American goods totaling nearly $30 billion. Golf equipment, just one of the items on that list, and purveyors already feeling the pain.
We've baked in about a 20% potential loss in equipment sales and whatnot.
But the owner of this golf training center says he'll take the hit for now.
We're angry, we're frustrated, we're confused, and it's all really heads down to Washington in that Oval Office, you know. I'm pleased that we're standing up, and I think we all have to do that as long as we can.
And most agree. A recent Angus Reid survey showed a majority of Canadians support retaliatory tariffs.
I think we should for sure retaliate. But yeah, it's definitely going to hurt, I think, both sides.
Of course, it's frustrating, but I think we have to look within ourselves a bit more and see how we can turn things around.
But turning things around, this economist believes, won't happen with tariffs in a trade war.
We will lose, and every econometric study I've read shows that. Retaliatory tariffs fall on Canadians. They don't fall on Donald Trump.
But some Canadians say it's about more than winning and losing.
I think we can't back down, right? It's not just about trade, it's about sovereignty as well, which is super important.
That repeated threat to take over Canada from Donald Trump now being met with a clear message.
We're dealing with an administration that, quite frankly, until it shows some respect for our sovereignty, probably won't be hearing from us.
And Prime Minister Mark Carney has been clear. He's ready to meet Donald Trump if he respects Canada's sovereignty. Heather?
Jeremy, thank you. The new Prime Minister is set to meet with European leaders this week to strengthen economic ties. Mark Carney leaves tomorrow for France and the UK to explore deeper bilateral trade options. He's also scheduled to meet with King Charles. His new cabinet already making moves, ditching the consumer carbon tax, though critics are skeptical of any savings Canadians may see. CTV's Colton Prale has more.
With the stroke of a pen, Justin Trudeau's consumer carbon tax is out, and a new Liberal vision is in. Today, the party launching a new ad highlighting Prime Minister Mark Carney's Day One change, dropping the consumer cost of carbon to zero as of April 1st, but keeping the industrial tax.
He will keep the carbon tax law in place, even while he temporarily hides the carbon tax from the gas pump.
While the Conservatives argue Carney will bring back the tax after an election, economists say the biggest political impact is that many Canadians may not feel the savings.
On a week-to-week basis, these things become rounding errors. The reality is that if we're talking about less than a Tim Hortons cup of coffee a week, This isn't going to be the life-changing exercise.
Estimates from the parliamentary budget officer last fall show the average family will save a few $100s next fiscal year, with the most savings in Ontario and the fewest in Saskatchewan. Currently, the $80 per ton tax adds about 17 cents to every litre of gas. But consumers may not see a major difference at the pumps for long, with the switch to summer gas coming soon.
I expect an increase of about 5 cents a liter, which might offset some of that cost. And of course, summertime demand might impact that, but that would be true of every year. No matter what happens, there would be a net decrease.
Good afternoon.
Meanwhile, premiers are responding. David Eby says he'll remove British Columbia's consumer carbon tax, while in Alberta, Danielle Smith isn't celebrating.
He's made his views very clear about not wanting a transparent carbon tax. He wants a hidden one. So I don't think it does Alberta any good if we end up seeing massive increases to industrial carbon tax.
For now, Canada's industrial carbon tax is staying in place. Mark Carney has promised to improve and tighten the system if elected and extend it until 2035. Critics say that could wipe out any gains Canadians make when the consumer portion is cut. Heather.
All right, Colton, thanks. Prime Minister Carney is also putting national defence under the microscope, asking for a review of Canada's plan to purchase a fleet of F-35 fighter jets from the U.S. The deal with the U.S. government and Lockheed Martin is for 88 planes at a cost of about $85 million each. A spokesperson for Defence Minister Bill Blair says the contract remains in place and Canada has made a legal commitment to purchase the first 16 planes, but that the government needs to make sure the contract in its current form is in the best interest of Canada and the Canadian Armed Forces. A BC woman who was detained by U.S. immigration officials for 11 days is back home. Jasmine Mooney says the reasons for her detention remain unclear.
I can't even process what just happened because there was no heads up. Next thing you know, I'm taken and for 2 weeks haven't been told anything, moved in different cells, sleeping on cement, sleeping in different jail cells. Like it just... nothing makes sense to me, and I'm still trying to process the entire situation.
Mooney was detained at the U.S.-Mexico border on March 3rd. The 35-year-old business consultant says she had a previous U.S. visa canceled, but did not think she'd have an issue applying for another one with a new job offer. A statement from U.S. Immigration and Customs last week said she was processed in accordance with President Trump's executive order that subjected all aliens in violation of U.S. immigration law to possible arrest. Tesla CEO Elon Musk, the target of a protest today at a showroom in Ottawa. Demonstrators say they're striking back against Musk's views on Canadian sovereignty and his influence on U.S. President Trump's policies.
We're getting a great response from people driving by, lots of horn honking. So I would say that public support is very much on side with our message.
Organizers dubbed it the Tesla takedown and say Canadians should consider selling their Tesla cars and dumping any shares they have in the company. Canola farmers in this country are feeling vulnerable, facing looming trade barriers imposed by their two largest export markets, the U.S. and China, which is set to impose a 100% tariff next week. CTV's Allison Bamford reports.
Jared Gust is counting down the days before he's back in the field.
We start planting in, let's say, 30 days.
The Saskatchewan farmer still plans to grow canola this year, despite the crop facing a double dose of potential tariffs.
These are like really unprecedented times, like having the Americans and the Chinese come at us at the same time.
On top of a 25% tariff from the U.S., China plans to impose a 100% retaliatory tariff on Canadian canola oil starting Thursday. It follows Canada's 100% tariff placed on Chinese electric vehicles last fall. The federal government has said there are no plans to drop those.
There needs to be action by our federal government before any election call to engage with China to ensure that the canola industry is not left in purgatory.
$4.9 billion of Canadian canola, the cooking oil ingredient, went to China last year. Experts say Chinese tariffs could impact thousands of jobs in canola crushing facilities and squash markets.
It is going to
take a big bite out of canola prices.
A hit that could hurt Canada just as much as the U.S. tariffs on steel and aluminum.
They're both big risks to the country, but those hit very different regions with very different voting patterns, and that changes the politics.
But farmers like Gust are tired of playing politics.
We don't want to be pawns in somebody's trade game.
A game he hopes ends soon. Allison Bamford, CTV News, Saskatoon.
Canada's oldest company may be forced to close its doors. Hudson's Bay plans to begin liquidating its entire business as early as next week, putting thousands of jobs at risk. The move is sure to leave a massive hole in the country's retail landscape. CTV's Kamal Kuramali has more.
Designer clothing and high-priced items. A draw for shoppers, but even on a busy Saturday at the mall, parts of this Hudson's Bay store in Toronto sit quiet.
It's quite quiet in there. You'd think it'd be busier than that.
It's been that way for years.
I don't know how they've lasted so long, actually.
Now the company is on the brink of a complete shutdown.
From an odds standpoint, it's just not looking good, unfortunately, for them right now.
It says despite exhaustive efforts to secure sufficient financing, it'll now need to take part in the full liquidation of the entire business, which could begin as soon as next week.
It's a massive blow to our morale and psyche.
Hudson's Bay dates back more than 350 years, when England gave the company exclusive control over the territory surrounding Hudson Bay. Later, it began to operate beyond fur trade, establishing trading posts.
Trading posts that were founded by the Bay, resulted in many Canadian towns and cities founded around them.
The company then expanded to Manitoba and beyond. In the 1920s, it turned into a department store chain, now with 80 locations across Canada and more than 9,000 employees. But experts say it was when the company was bought by an American firm in 2008 its downfall began, because it couldn't connect with Canadian consumers.
American shoppers are much more price sensitive. We also see that in the American consumers, they're much more sensitive and receptive to luxury brands.
Court filings show the company owes roughly $1 billion to creditors, including landlords and fashion companies like Ralph Lauren, Chanel, and Columbia, blaming its financial struggles on the pandemic and trade tensions between Canada and the U.S., while online giants like Amazon have taken away a big chunk of their sales. The company says it's still looking to find a financial solution with stakeholders and landlords to avoid a full shutdown. But if that doesn't work, it plans to wrap up its liquidation process by June. Heather.
Kamal, thank you for this. The owners of the Toronto pub that was the scene of a mass shooting last week have broken their silence over the frightening incident. The Piper Arms released a statement on social media that reads in part, "We are heartbroken over what happened at our Scarborough Town Centre location on what was supposed to be a special opening night," adding the safety of our guests remains our top priority. 12 people were injured, 7 of them by gunfire, when 3 armed suspects burst in and opened fire. Police have yet to release a motive. More than 25 people have been killed by powerful storms ripping through several Midwest and southeastern U.S. states. Dozens of tornadoes were said to have formed across several states between Friday night and Saturday morning. Severe storms ripped through the region, putting millions at risk. Intense devastation left in their wake, with homes demolished, trees knocked over, and power lines down. Coming up, the eyes and ears of Canada's north.
Literally, there's nothing like the Canadian Rangers anywhere else.
The role of Canadian Rangers and their secret to security in the north. Plus, a doctor's plea to end an unnecessary task. They are the eyes and the ears of Canada's north, the Canadian Rangers, part-time members of the armed forces whose knowledge of the Arctic could be Canada's secret weapon. Now, a call to double their ranks is bringing hope to one northern community, but as W5's John Woodward reports, it faces a major hurdle.
In a tent on the Arctic ice is where you'll often find Emmanuel Adam.
Today it turned out nice. This morning was 30 below.
Adam was at home as a guide in the harsh frozen lands around Tuktoyaktuk on the Arctic Ocean until he was around 40. Since then, he's spent 30 years as a Canadian Ranger.
What's the longest you've spent out on the tundra or the ice?
One fall, I flew out. It was just starting to freeze up.
Yeah.
And I didn't come home till Christmas.
How many months is that?
3 months.
He's sharing this knowledge with the so-called Green Army of recruits training here in Operation Nanook in the north. They are green in more ways than one.
What do you think would happen to the soldiers and the sailors and so on here if they didn't have local knowledge?
If you didn't have it, you would learn by trial and error mostly.
Yeah?
Yeah.
An error on the ice can be fatal.
Yes.
Adam, just one of about 2,000 Arctic Rangers, part-time military experienced in the wilderness, many of them indigenous. Often found on snowmobiles, they assist with everything from protecting the soldiers from predators, finding routes across the otherwise impassable ice and snow, and simply helping the troops survive in the bitter cold.
Everything we know down south about surviving doesn't really apply up here.
Ranger Jimmy Davison is part of a crew keeping watch over military scientists in Parsons Lake, some 60 kilometers north of Inuvik.
Finding shelter is a lot harder, finding warmth and supplies like firewood and stuff. That doesn't exist up here. The elements get you real quick.
You're more than welcome. Help yourself with the extra food. Fill up plates.
At a feast in Tuktoyaktuk, Rangers mingle with soldiers.
Literally, there's nothing like the Canadian Rangers anywhere else.
Among them, Whitney Lockenbauer, a Canada Research Chair in the study of the Canadian North, and also an honorary Ranger. He says the Rangers make the North accessible to Canada's military.
By having that foundation, having that footprint, it allows us to pull assets, pull resources, military resources, up to the north to operate if we need to.
But only 2,000 must cover a vast territory, at least 40% of Canada's landmass. That's led to calls by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to double their ranks.
Our Junior Ranger program has about 35 kids from 12 to 18 years old.
Veteran Ranger and politician Jackie Jacobson says Ranger training helps children avoid the drugs and depression that ravage this northern hamlet.
We lost 22 people here last year in the community. Every 22 people, we're the ones that all go to the funeral. It's sad when you could sing off the song sheet and you don't need to look at the paper.
He would love to train more, but there are not enough Ranger instructors.
We need more active military guys to come to Yellowknife to become a Ranger instructor, because the Ranger instructors that we do have, they're getting burnt out.
Out on the ice, Emmanuel Adam is still training new Rangers, but at 71, he won't be around forever. He's hoping more instructors can help.
And tomorrow, John speaks with local leaders in the north who say Arctic security goes hand in hand with economic development. Still ahead, a prescription for an administrative headache. Why some doctors say they are sick and tired of writing sick notes. There is a renewed push to eliminate sick notes. New data shows doctors in Manitoba write more than 500,000 sick notes every year. Advocates say the time spent writing notes could be better spent treating patients. CTV's Alex Karpa explains.
Doctors in Manitoba say writing sick notes is an administrative burden.
It takes up patient time, physician time, paperwork, secretarial time, and all that costs the system money.
Sick notes cost taxpayers an estimated $8 million per year. This according to Doctors Manitoba. They are now pushing to eliminate sick notes for short-term absences.
Sick notes are one type of unnecessary paperwork, taking up over 36,000 hours of physician time per year.
Dr. Randy Guzman says doctors write over 600,000 sick notes per year in Manitoba, which he says is a waste of time, and that eliminating them altogether could free up around 300,000 patient visits a year.
Which is the equivalent of adding over 50 doctors overnight with very little cost.
Last year, the Canadian Medical Association called for an end to sick note requirements by companies for employees with short-term minor illnesses. Individual employers in Manitoba decide whether to require sick notes, but Tori McNally says these notes just clog up the healthcare system.
We're realizing as employers that it's not actually serving as the true evidence document that we need it to be.
According to a Doctors Manitoba survey, 96% of Manitobans support eliminating or limiting sick notes. Dr. Mehta says the patients are ultimately the ones impacted the most.
I think we need to understand that most people are quite honest, and when they say they're sick and can't go to work, they're sick.
Manitoba and Alberta are the only two provinces that have yet to take action to limit sick days. Quebec recently introduced a law back in January, giving workers in that province up to 3 sick days without having to require a doctor's note. Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Still ahead, Saturn's multiplying moon count, the final tally, and the Canadian connection. The lunar eclipse got plenty of attention here on Earth this week, but there was also excitement about the moons around Saturn, and a dizzying number just discovered, more than 100. It was all thanks to a team of scientists, including Canadians. Here's CTV's John Vanavalley-Rao.
And liftoff of the Cassini spacecraft. Back almost 30 years ago, when NASA launched a probe called Cassini towards Saturn, scientists had only confirmed 18 moons around the planet, which seemed plenty to keep track of.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
One of them looking like the Death Star from Star Wars. But over the years, more and more smaller moons were spotted, and now a flood of them.
The sheer number of 128 is unprecedented.
While Saturn is famous for its dazzling rings, it turns out it also holds the title for most moons in the solar system. The latest discovery brings Saturn's total to an almost ridiculous 274. Jupiter, in second place, has 95. So I guess Saturn is now the moon king?
Well, that's not a term that I personally use, but indeed Saturn definitely, in terms of number of moons, is by far the most well-endowed planet.
The moons were located using this powerful telescope in Hawaii by a team of astronomers in Canada, the US, Taiwan, and France. They're not easy to see because each is just a few kilometers wide, and with so many being added at once, some wonder if it's time to refine what is considered a moon. It's generally been accepted as any natural object, big or small, in a stable orbit around a planet.
I mean, a few kilometers across, but in the scale of the solar system, they're so small, it almost doesn't make sense to be using the same word.
It's thought the tiny moons were created after larger ones smashed into each other sometime in the last 100 million years. Their discovery getting lots of attention.
It's always nice to see people interested in the somewhat more serene celestial world than all the messy things that are happening down here on Earth right now.
As for having to recite the names of all of those new moons, let's hope it's never on anyone's science test. John Vanavalley-Rao, CTV News, Toronto.
And that is our newscast for this Saturday night. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.